Emily stared at the check in her hands, her mind racing. This wasn't just a ridiculous amount of money. It was an escape, a way out of the endless cycle of stress, late shifts, and barely scraping by. But was she really about to do this? Pretend to be engaged to a complete stranger? She glanced up at Ryan, who was watching her with an amused expression, as if he already knew her answer. And maybe he did. Because deep down, she knew she couldn't walk away from this. "What's the catch?" she asked, folding her arms. Ryan smirked. "No catch. Just one night. You show up, play the part, and keep your cool. That's all." Emily exhaled slowly. It sounded simple enough, but something told her nothing about this night would be easy. Ryan picked up his phone. "I'll have my assistant bring you a dress. The event starts in 2 hours." Wait, tonight? Her stomach flipped. She had expected some kind of preparation, maybe a few days to get ready, but this was happening now. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "You're backing out?" Emily straightened. "No, just surprised." He gave a small nod, satisfied. "Good. My driver will take you to a salon first. You need the right look." Emily bit the inside of her cheek, resisting the urge to tell him that she was perfectly fine the way she was. But she reminded herself that this wasn't real. It was a job, just like delivering pizzas. Only this time, the tip could change her life. Minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up outside, and Emily was whisked away into a world she had only ever seen in movies. The salon was unlike anything she had experienced before. Luxury everywhere, from the crystal chandeliers to the marble floors. A team of professionals transformed her in record time, styling her hair into elegant waves and dressing her in a stunning black gown that fit her like a glove. When she finally stepped out of the dressing room, she barely recognized herself. Ryan's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, gave an approving nod. "That'll do. Let's go." Emily barely had time to process everything before she was back in the car, heading to a high-end restaurant in the heart of the city. As the vehicle rolled to a stop, she turned to Claire. "What if I mess up?" Claire didn't hesitate. "Then this whole thing falls apart." Not exactly reassuring. Emily took a deep breath as the driver opened her door. Cameras flashed in the distance, and people in expensive suits and gowns moved toward the entrance. Ryan was waiting for her outside, looking effortlessly confident in a tailored suit. When he saw her, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise? Approval? She couldn't tell. "You clean up well," he said smoothly, offering his arm. Emily hesitated before slipping her hand through his. "You're good at this." Ryan glanced at her. "At what?" "Lying." He chuckled. "You have no idea." As they walked inside, Emily could feel the weight of 100 eyes on her. The tension in the air was thick, the room buzzing with quiet conversations and clinking glasses. A group of well-dressed businessmen and their wives sat at a long table, all of them turning toward Ryan the moment they arrived. "Ryan!" A broad-shouldered man with a commanding presence stood up, grinning. "And this must be the fiancé you've been hiding from us." Emily forced a smile, suddenly hyper-aware of how much was riding on this. She couldn't afford to slip up. Ryan tightened his grip on her hand. "Everyone, meet Emily." The introductions went by in a blur. She smiled, nodded, and played the role of the supportive fiancé, listening to business talk that made no sense to her. But something felt off. The way some of the men looked at Ryan, their polite smiles not quite reaching their eyes. The way one woman, elegant, poised, and clearly familiar with him, kept watching Emily like she was an unsolved puzzle. And then, as dinner was served, the conversation took a turn. "So, Emily," the broad-shouldered man leaned forward, his smile sharp. "How did you and Ryan meet?" Emily's heart stuttered. That was the one thing they hadn't prepared for. Ryan gave her a small, almost imperceptible squeeze under the table, but he didn't answer for her. He was testing her. For a second, panic threatened to creep in, but then she remembered something. This was just another performance. And if Ryan wanted to play games, she could too. She smiled, looking straight at the man. "Oh, it's actually a funny story." Ryan's expression didn't change, but she could feel the tension in his grip. Good, because if she was going to be in this game, she wasn't about to play it on his terms. Emily smiled, her mind racing as she crafted a story on the spot. She could feel Ryan watching her, his grip still firm under the table, but he didn't interrupt. He was waiting to see what she would say. "Well," she began, her tone light. "It was completely unexpected. I was having the worst day. Spilled coffee on my shirt, missed my bus, and then, to top it off, I had to deliver a pizza in the middle of a storm." She glanced at Ryan, letting the smallest smirk play on her lips. "And guess who was on the other side of that delivery?" The man who had asked, Mr. Callahan, chuckled, intrigued. "Ryan ordered pizza? Now that's surprising." Ryan played, along effortlessly. "What can I say? Sometimes even I need a break from five-star meals," Emily continued, building confidence with every word. "Anyway, I was drenched, exhausted, and just wanted to drop the pizza and leave. But then he asked me something totally unexpected." She paused for effect, watching as curiosity sparked in the guest's eyes. "He asked me to stay for dinner." There was a collective hum of interest around the table. The woman who had been eyeing Emily all night, blonde, sophisticated, and clearly someone important in Ryan's life, tilted her head, studying her. "And just like that, you said yes?" she asked smoothly. Emily shrugged. "I mean, it was hard to say no. Fancy apartment, warm food, and a man who was surprisingly easy to talk to." She turned to Ryan, giving him a knowing look. "I guess the rest is history." Ryan's lips twitched as if he was amused, but Emily could sense the shift in the air. This wasn't just about playing a role anymore. This was a test. And then the blonde woman leaned forward slightly. "How romantic. But tell me, Emily, do you always accept dinner invitations from complete strangers?" The words were light, but the meaning behind them was razor-sharp. Emily instantly realized what was happening. This woman, whoever she was, didn't believe a single word. Emily held her gaze, refusing to be rattled. "Only when it feels right," she answered smoothly. The woman's lips curled into a small, unreadable smile, but before she could push further, Mr. Callahan clapped his hands together, drawing attention back to him. "Well, Ryan, it seems like you finally found someone who keeps you on your toes. About time." There was laughter around the table, and just like that, the moment passed. But Emily didn't miss the way Ryan's jaw tensed slightly, as if he knew the storm wasn't over. The rest of the dinner went by in a blur. Emily played her role perfectly, smiling at the right moments, laughing when needed, and keeping her responses just vague enough to avoid trouble. But she could feel the weight of something unspoken pressing down on her. By the time they stepped outside into the crisp night air, she let out a quiet breath of relief. Ryan didn't speak until they were in the car. "You handled that well," he said finally. Emily glanced at him. "You sound surprised?" "I am," he admitted. "I thought you'd crack under pressure." She scoffed. "Please, I deal with angry customers all the time. Rich people throwing trick questions at me? Not much different." Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. "You really are something else." There was a beat of silence before Emily turned serious. "Who was she?" Ryan didn't pretend not to understand. He sighed, looking out the window. "Charlotte. An ex?" Something like that. Emily didn't push, but she didn't have to. She had seen it in Charlotte's eyes, the history, the quiet challenge. Whatever had been between them wasn't completely in the past. The car pulled up to Ryan's building, and Emily felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. This was it. The deal was over. She had done her part. When they stepped out, Ryan turned to her. "Come upstairs for a second." Emily hesitated. "Why?" "To get your check," he said simply. Right. That was the reason she had done this in the first place. Inside, the penthouse felt different now. Less intimidating. More familiar. Ryan walked over to his desk, grabbed a pen, and signed the check. When he handed it to her, she stared at the number for a long moment. "Thank you," she said finally. Ryan nodded. "You earned it." She turned to leave, but something made her stop. Maybe it was the way he was watching her. Maybe it was the way she realized that, for the first time in a long time, she had actually enjoyed herself tonight. "Ryan," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "Was any of it real?" He didn't answer right away, but when he did, his voice was quieter, less certain than before. "I don't know." Emily gave a small smile. "Me neither." And with that, she walked out, the check in her hand and a story she would never forget. The rain poured heavily outside as Emily tightened her grip on the pizza box, her fingers slightly numb from the cold. It was her third delivery of the night, and exhaustion was already settling in, but she had no choice. Every dollar counted. College tuition wasn't going to pay itself, and neither were the mounting bills stacked on her tiny apartment's kitchen counter. She sighed, staring up at the towering glass building in front of her. The place screamed wealth, the kind she could only dream of. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside, her sneakers squeaking against the polished marble floor as she approached the receptionist. "I'm here for a delivery," she said, her voice firm despite the nerves bubbling in her stomach. The woman behind the desk barely looked up before directing her to the penthouse suite. Emily hesitated for a second. She had never delivered pizza to a place this fancy before, but quickly shook off the thought. A job was a job. When the elevator doors slid open, she found herself stepping into a breathtaking living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. And there, sitting casually on a luxurious leather couch, was a man who looked like he had stepped straight out of a magazine cover. Ryan Carter. The name was familiar. How could it not be? He was one of the youngest millionaires in the city, the owner of a tech empire, and someone who probably never had to worry about things like unpaid bills or working late shifts. His sharp blue eyes flickered to her, assessing her with an intensity that made her shift uncomfortably. "You're the delivery girl?" he asked, standing up. Emily nodded, handing him the box. "That'll be $18.75. To her surprise, he barely looked at the pizza. Instead, he studied her for a long moment before smirking. "Actually, I have a different kind of deal for you," she frowned. "Excuse me? I need a fiancé. Just for one night." Emily blinked, thinking she had misheard him. "You... what?" Ryan exhaled, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I have an important business dinner tonight, and let's just say my investors value family men. My actual date canceled. Last minute, and I can't show up alone." Emily couldn't help but laugh in disbelief. "So, you want me to pretend to be your fiancé? Do I look like someone who fits into your world?" Ryan's smirk only widened. "That's the beauty of it. You're unexpected, and I'll make it worth your while." He reached for his wallet and pulled out a check, scribbling down a number before sliding it across the table toward her. Emily's heart stopped when she saw the amount. That was more money than she had made in the last 2 years combined. She swallowed, her mind spinning. This was crazy, completely insane. But as she thought about her student loans, her overdue rent, and the dreams she had put on hold, one thing became very clear. She had nothing to lose. Taking a deep breath, she looked up at Ryan and said, "Tell me exactly what I have to do, and Just like that, Emily's life was about to change forever. But what she didn't know was that she wasn't the only one playing a game that night.